Who noticed that, right? So hi, I want to welcome you guys. I'm so grateful that you are here, that we're here to have this dialogue. I am Chanel Curry. I am the CEO and founder of Media Done Responsibly, and I'm so excited for this partnership with Living Room Conversations. I just want to talk a little bit about two of the really dynamic conversations that we've had recently and that will be living on the Living Room Conversations site. One of them is called Black Women Answer the Call, and the other one is called Unmasking, a Dialogue for Black Men. Both of these were born out of a need where the shootings of George Floyd, or actually not the shooting of George Floyd, but the killing of George Floyd by a police officer, the killing of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and many, many others who have been killed due to state violence, state-sanctioned violence, have really riveted the world at this point. It's been a global issue that we've been addressing. And I feel like in very specific ways, it has impacted Black men and Black women. We were already in the process of having dialogues using the Living Room Conversations format, where we were having these virtual safe spaces to talk about things like the coronavirus, how it's impacting our lives, to address many other issues as well. And so we wanted to continue this conversation, and we saw a really great need to do this when George Floyd was killed. So we had these two conversations. The first one was Black Women Answer the Call, and that specifically came from this idea of George Floyd calling out to his mom when he was being killed. And there was a protester in some of the subsequent protests that had a sign that read, you know, when George Floyd called out to his mom, you know, mothers everywhere, you know, were activated and felt that call. And so we decided, let's get together, let's talk about this issue. Let's not just talk about it from the standpoint of what needs to change, but let's touch our feelings. I think we're always so ready to take action, which is needed, but also it was important for us to heal, to process. A lot of times, you know, anyone who's been on an airplane knows that they'll tell you to put your mask on first before putting a mask on someone, an oxygen mask on someone else, should there be an emergency. And sometimes we skip that part. We just go to try to fix a situation before we put the mask on ourselves and try to give ourselves life. And so this was an answer to that. We wanted to give ourselves life. We wanted to dialogue. We wanted to talk and share with one another in powerful ways. The second was Unmasking, a Dialogue for Black Men. And just having conversations with my brothers, with the men in my life, it seemed like there was such a great need for Black men to be able to take off that mask of respectability, the mask that keeps them safe and protected in public places where they're not able to have real emotions. They're not able to show anger or animosity, or even feel threatened or show that feeling of being threatened without that itself being a risk to their lives. And so we wanted to offer them a very safe space where they could have these conversations, talk amongst themselves, and be safe and be clear. Feel what they feel, share what they wanted to share, dialogue, support one another in those ways. And so I'm really excited to have our original hosts on here for that. The Black Women Answer the Call, I was a host for that, as well as Angela Richardson, who is here. Thank you. And if you want to wave to show who you are, yes. And then also for Unmasking, a Dialogue for Black Men, we had Amiri Manzili, who is here, and Jason Mitchell. And so what I'd just like to take a few minutes to do is open the floor to you to talk a little bit about why you felt it was necessary to have this conversation, be a part of this conversation, and what you thought the impact of that was, and maybe any thoughts for anyone who is going to independently host one of these dialogues. Who wants to start?
I can start.
Okay. Hey, Angela, welcome.
Hey y'all, thank you for having me, Chanel. Nice to see you all here. So when Chanel approached me about answering the call, and she and I had just a woman to woman check-in call with each other, just really dialoguing after everything that was about everything that was going on, and we started talking about what's the call. And for me personally, along with all the things that Chanel just so beautifully articulated, I started asking what's the deeper call?
Mm-hmm.
What's the call from what's the call from Breonna Taylor? What's the call from George Floyd? What's the call from our ancestors? To one of us, each one of our souls that's asking for something to show itself right now, and specifically for Black women in this moment. I personally was unable to respond immediately in that moment. I felt so much grief that I said to Chanel, I want to talk with other Black women. I want us to gather in circle and just show and reveal our hearts to each other. It feels like just a need, there's a call for a space for us to just show and reveal our hearts, because so often we are, just shouldering, we're strong, we're this, we're that. And this moment was just like, my heart was breaking open. And I wasn't wanting to shoulder any of it. I was wanting to just let my heart break open and feel the emotion and feel it with other women. So the first call that I heard was from the hearts of so many of our sisters that just haven't allowed ourselves the space to be vulnerable, to take care of our hearts, to take care of our bodies, to take care of ourselves. And just, I said to Chanel when we were talking, I was like, yeah, I know that you're doing all this work and organizing this, but girl, how are you doing? How is your heart doing? I know that you're the bomb, and I know that, I know, but how's your heart? Are you sleeping? Are you eating? And so there was a call to just connect with women, to say, sis, how you doing? And then as we got together to collectively bring in the call from within, the deeper call of the soul, the deeper call of our lineage, the deeper call um, that feels like space opened up for us to be able to gather together and pull in something that we haven't been able to pull in before. So for me personally, I wanted to just first and foremost just give women, Black women, an opportunity, a safe space where we didn't have to be anything but what we beautifully are. Yes. To share our feelings.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And I have to just add to what Angela is saying, that she was a good check person for me, accountability person, because every time I would go into my head and the organizing and the planning and we need to do this and that to take action, she would come back to that question of, how do you feel? What's going on inside of you? And help me come back to that place of reflecting, which is less comfortable, right? To feel that anger, to feel that grief, to feel that hurt, than it is to say, okay, I'm just going to take action. I'm going to try to fix it. So thank you for that. Yes, who would like to share next?
I'll go. It was a great honor to be with my brother Amiri. It was our first opportunity to come together. And in our preparation, it was really clear from the work that Amiri does and the work that I do, that men in general are holding things in. And it was an amazing opportunity for men who did not know each other. A couple of did, but by and large, the men that came together were unfamiliar with each other, but they set down the necessity for familiarity, and they allowed their heart to be available. They shared some of their fears, they shared some of their doubts, they shared some of their struggles, and they were also interested and able to communicate their interest in doing something about what they were feeling, rather than just compartmentalize it, rather than just sweeping it under the rug, rather than just flexing and putting it into that energy. The men that showed up for themselves, and then as the time moved on, they showed up for each other, and that was powerful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jason.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and pick up from where Jason left off. To echo his sentiments, right? It was my first time working with Jason. What I found interesting within working with him was just the balance that was exhibited in both our backgrounds and just our approach. For those who are familiar with like orishas and things like that, I liken it to Shango and Ogun, right? Like Jason kind of plays that Ogun role to kind of a little bit more wisdom, a little bit more mediated, a little bit more insight. Whereas me, kind of a little bit more Shango, a little bit more ready to kind of chop off that head, right? Kind of, but I think it served well for the conversation. I think having that balance was extremely important. Same thing, my why kind of echoes your guys' why. I was in a state of despair. I was in a state of bewilderment, looking for answers. A lot of my search for answers was riddled in my ancestors, right? So I looked to Baldwin, I looked to Kwame Ture. So I found myself in books. While that was important and that was needed, I needed to be in communion with my brothers. And Chanel gave me the perfect opportunity to do so. And in doing so, I got a wide array of people from different backgrounds, right? There was actually a former cop in our conversation. So the insight that he was able to provide was priceless, right? There's not too many people can say they've been in those type of spaces where they're being open with police and they're willing to take off the mask and they're open and they're willing to be vulnerable, right? And another thing for me was just the opportunity to listen, to actively listen, to listen with my ears, to listen with my eyes, to listen with my heart, to listen with my spirit, right? And just using all of those things to hear what's being said and not to listen to respond, but just to listen. And to me, that was a great practice for myself. Being a professor, you're not really trained to listen, you're trained to speak. So it kind of took me out of my element and forced me to be attentive to what they were saying. I heard a lot of people mentioning how they felt helpless, how they felt vulnerable, they couldn't do anything. And I think that's kind of where the Shango came in for me, is like, well, we're not as helpless as we're making ourselves out to be. You know, we must know our history and know how we came through these circumstances, and we fought our way to freedom, and we cannot give that up. And too often we're pitched this idea of us being subservient and us being meek and humble and willing to take our oppression, but that's not our true history. And for me, I kind of felt at a certain point, it was my job to kind of problematize this notion of us having to suffer quietly and letting us know that, even in the civil rights movement, although they were nonviolent, right, we had the Deacon of Defense defending those nonviolent marches. So that may be a solution that we're taking a disavow to, and it may be something that we may look a little bit deeper into. So just kind of providing those type of insights that may not be commonly discussed, I think was important. And again, more than anything, being in community with my brothers, just having these ideas being exchanged with one another. And I believe people left inspired. People left wanting to continue the conversation. People looked for, even though the conversation wasn't about action, but they looked for what could we do next? And I think that's important, because what you see, something happens, everyone's caught up in the momentum of the moment, but they don't want to transfer that into long-lasting type of action-oriented plans. And that conversation started to pick up. So I was very pleased. I was gratefully humbled to be a part of the process. And I'm looking forward to doing more work.
Yes, thank you. And from what I hear, your conversation with the men went almost about an hour over.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot about what was needed and that space being needed.
I had to put my babies on pause for a little bit, and we kind of extended that conversation. It was important. You know, I didn't mind doing it. I think it needed to be done. I didn't want to stop talking myself, so it was important.
Absolutely. And in addition to it going long, the men shared their resources. So part of what it ended up happening at the end was, what was that organization you mentioned? Drop that into the chat. What was that place where you're recommending us we go, or, and so then it wasn't simply just the dialogue, but then also an exchange of resources, which I think really enhanced what the men experienced.
Absolutely. That's absolutely necessary. And that was part of our conversation with the women as well at the end of the sharing of resources, staying connected. A lot of the women wanted to continue this conversation into a part 2, and stay connected, find out what other people are doing as well in the community. And so it was really wonderful. I thank all of you for participating and being a part of it. Does anybody have any last things they want to say?
Just for me, in regards to people who want to kind of carry this work on, don't minimize the power of listening. Like, I think if you come in with that intention, you will get the results that you're looking for. You'll be surprised what you can learn from other people if you kind of take your thoughts out of their conversation and let their conversation be their conversation. So to me, like, go in with the intent to listen. Go in with the intent to provide a space for healing, because as much as we need to fight, as much as we need to get freedom, we need to heal first. And you can't effectively do those things without being whole, right? And when they say hurt people. So we have to begin that process of healing, so that way we don't continue the process of hurt.
Yeah,
Professor.
I love that. And then what I would add to that is, you don't have to have perfected it to get involved. You have the heart for it. You have an openness. Be willing to create spaces to engage, especially in this program, because you can perfect as you go along, as long as you bring what Amiri just mentioned, is your availability to listen. You're listening with your ears. You're listening with your heart.
Yes, and with the spirit of non-judgment. I love that. Clearing your mind of your own thoughts. I love that. Yeah, thank you all so much. I appreciate it. I'm excited, and I'm excited for anyone who is going to be taking the conversation guides and moving forward with it in your own communities. This is really, really powerful, and I think we have a really great opportunity for collective healing. And now I'm going to figure out how to stop the recording.